I have spent 11 years pulling Cassel Hollow up out of the ground, and I can tell you exactly how it feels when a dead thing starts breathing under your boots. We called it a battlefield because that was the word our grandparents used, out of habit, though nothing had fought there in 45,000 years. What it actually was a wound, a colony driven under the rock in a single catastrophic season, buried so deep and so fast that the founders never had time to seal it properly, and by the time anyone came back to finish the job, the world above had grown a district over the scar, and mostly forgotten which street covered which grave. My crew didn't dig for salvage, we dug for names. Every plate we lifted, every corridor we cleared a centimeter at a time with brushes and patience, instead of blast charges, we logged for the registry, so someone, someday, could read who had lived down there before the ground closed over them. It was slow, careful work, and we loved it the way you love something that asks nothing of you but your whole attention. There were 9 of us on the terrace crew that season. I knew the sound of each of their trowels against stone, the way a man knows footsteps in his own house. We had another 40 years of digging ahead of us. Easy. Cassel Hollow had kept its own secrets for 45,000 years. Another 40 didn't seem like much to ask. I had grown up on stories about the day the colony went under. Not tragic stories, not the kind told to frighten children, but quiet ones, the kind an old aunt tells while she is doing something else with her hands. My family had stayed on this ground for every one of those 45,000 years, generation folded into generation, most of them never knowing why the maintenance guild kept certain deep conduits, fed with power that served no visible purpose. You grow up inside a habit like that, and it stops feeling strange. It becomes simply what your family does. We keep the lights on down there. Nobody asked why anymore. I certainly hadn't, not in 11 years of digging directly above whatever those lights were for. Then the sky told us we were wrong. 3 ships came down out of a clear noon, hulls scarred and patched with 100 different metals, the kind of vessel that has been rebuilt so many times it no longer belongs to any one shipyard. I watched them settle on the flat ground above our dig site from the observation rail, and I felt the old cold drop through my stomach that every foreman on this world is trained to feel and never voice out loud. They called themselves the Corvain Free Company. We learned that later, from the recordings. 45,000 years ago they had been raiders working this coast, small-time and vicious, until a season went against them, and they fled off-world with nothing but the ships on their backs. In the time since, they had grown wealthy plundering weaker worlds across a dozen systems, wealthy enough to come home in force, wealthy enough to believe that home would still be exactly as small and as helpless as the place they had abandoned. They walked down their ramps, expecting a grave to rob. Our registry, our logged names, our 40 more years of patient brushwork, none of it meant anything to them. They saw broken ground and old bones and read it as an unguarded vault. One of my crew, a young woman named Priya, who had joined us only that spring, asked me over the comm whether we should run. I told her no. I told her to get below the outer terrace and stay low, because I did not yet understand what I was telling her to hide from, only that Cassel Hollow had never once, in 11 years, given us a reason to think it was defenseless, and I trusted that better than I trusted my own fear in that moment. I was close enough, on the rail with my glass, to watch the first squad's faces as they crossed onto the excavation terraces. There was an officer at their front, helmet under one arm, and even at that distance, I could see him grinning at his own men, delighted, the way a man grins when a fortune has fallen open in front of him for free. That grin did not last. The intercepted channel, Cassel Hollow's listening post, caught every word they said to each other, and I have read the transcript enough times since to know it without the page, put words to what I watched on his face change in real time. He was telling his second that the readings made no sense, that a colony buried this long should be silent all the way down, and instead the deep strata were humming. He said it twice, like a man convincing himself. Then a third time, quieter, when the first support pylon began to rise out of the earth on its own. Because Cassel Hollow was never dead ground. That was the part we ourselves hadn't fully understood, even after 11 years inside it. My crew had been excavating the upper wound. Below us, generations of engineers before mine had built and maintained something else entirely. A deep architecture the founders had started the very year the colony was buried, and every generation after had kept alive on a schedule nobody outside the maintenance guild was told the reason for. We had assumed it was structural bracing. It was a ward. It had been fed power and attention for 45,000 years on the strength of one instruction, passed hand to hand, through that whole span of time. Whoever comes back for this ground, when it is finally raised, is not coming back to rob a memorial. Rise ready. I heard the alien officer's voice again on that recording, thinner now, as the terraces around his men began to fold upward into shapes that were never meant to look like ruins. He said the word for home in his own language, twice, in a tone I did not need the translation software to explain, the tone of a man discovering that a story he had told himself for 45,000 years, a story that had made him rich and bold enough to bring his people back here, had been wrong from its very first line. He told his second to signal the ships for immediate lift. His second did not answer him. I think, by then, the man understood there would be no lift in time, and something in his voice on that last transmission was not anger, and was not fear exactly. It was closer to a man realizing, all at once, the size of the mistake he had built his whole fortune on top of. The ward rose the way something built with real patience rises. Without hurry, without spectacle, level after level breaking the surface in a slow, deliberate unfolding that made the company's 3 ships look like toys set down on a table that had just decided to stand up. Emplacements I had walked past every day for 11 years, thinking them decorative stonework, opened along seams I had never noticed. There was no monologue, no warning shot, no offer of mercy extended and refused. The ward did exactly the one thing it had been kept alive to do, and it did it in under 90 seconds. 2 of the 3 ships never lifted off the flat ground at all. The third made it as far as low orbit before the array's reach found it. I won't pretend there was triumph in watching it happen. There was only the old cold in my stomach easing, slowly, into something heavier and quieter than relief. Because the ward's rising cost us the hollow. Not all of it, but the upper terraces, the corridors my crew had spent 11 careful years clearing centimeter by centimeter, folded and shifted and closed over, as the deep architecture did what it was built to do. Names we had logged were buried again under new rock, this time by our own hand. In the same hour they finally stood a chance of coming back into the light. My senior archivist sat down on the observation rail afterward, and did not say anything for a long time. Neither did I. We are digging again now, slower than before, because the ground has changed, and trust has to be rebuilt 1 meter at a time, same as everything else worth having down there. Some of what we lost we will never recover. Whole registries of names that were 3 days from being read for the first time in 45,000 years, folded back under new rock by the same mechanism that saved us. Priya asked me, the week after, whether it had been worth it. I did not have a clean answer for her. I still don't. What I told her instead was that the people who built the ward never expected thanks for it either, and that we had inherited the debt and the gift together, without ever being consulted about the price, the same as every generation before us had. But I keep coming back to the instruction that outlived 45,000 years of ordinary people who never met each other and never expected thanks. Rise ready. Not rise angry. Not rise triumphant. Rise ready, and let the readiness be the whole of the answer. Cassel Hollow is still a wound. It always will be. But it is a wound that, when someone finally came to profit from it, proved it had spent every one of those 45,000 years wide awake.